everybody. This is the second episode of SLAMCAST featuring myself, Scotty.
And I am Gareth. Welcome to SLAMCAST.
Alright, so the topic we are going to be discussing today is actually one that was inspired by a match I was watching whilst just trolling around the internet one night between Juicen Liger and Tyler Breeze. Very good match, but was overshadowed by the epic Sasha Bayley match on the same card, that being the inaugural TakeOver Brooklyn. So the topic is overshadowed feuds and matches that have happened over the years in wrestling.
Right, we're going to go over that, and we're going to give you basically a look inside of these feuds that we think were overlooked for multiple different reasons, any number of reasons.
Yeah. Whether that be because, no, you go on.
By the end, we hope that you are more educated about this and you have fun. You have a nice ride along with us.
Yep. So now I'll start us off with the Owen Hart versus Triple H feud from the late 90s.
The late 90s, the Attitude Era.
Yeah. And it started in December of 97 when Owen made his return after the fallout from the controversial Montreal screw job that sent Brett to WCW, and he immediately went after HBK or Shawn Michaels.
That would make
from
sense,
there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Whilst HBK moved on to bigger and better things, Owen would segue into a rivalry with HBK's DX teammate in Triple H. A feud that was immensely personal and over the European Championship at that time. It would lead to a WrestleMania 14 match, which was actually pretty damn good when you think about it.
Well, of course, Owen Hart, one of the best technical workers of this era, and actually definitely a few years before this too. Basically, the early 90s up to the late 90s, Owen Hart was one of the best workers in the world.
Yeah, he was. And Triple H at this time was starting to really find his feet and develop himself as a worker as well.
Right, and Triple H had that nice promo ability, and of course, this feud was very personal because it's literally the two people closest to the two people that were involved in the screw job. It's almost like, we're getting the two mini bosses fighting each other over the two final bosses.
Yeah, so it was basically just a natural extension of the whole Shawn versus Brett arc.
Which is ingenious writing, at least in my opinion.
Really is.
So from my recollection of this feud, you did say they had a WrestleMania 14 match, I believe.
Yes.
And of course, WrestleMania 14 was a gigantic pay-per-view. It was, of course, things would be overshadowed on that night. But the European title has been the title for, like, the workers' belt for a long time, even leading up to this point.
Yeah, it really was. It was one of those horses, those belts that you would give to the workhorses and use that in order to elevate its prestige.
Indeed, and elevate its prestige it did up until, it elevated up to this kind of feud where it's two people that could main event a show fighting each other.
Yep. And at that WrestleMania match itself, Owen was looking like he was going to bring an end to Triple H's reign, but then Chyna interfered with a low blow, and then there was the pedigree, and that was the end of that match.
Well, of course, the Triple H cheating ways coming in here. I think that was a great booked finish.
It was. And then a month later, Unforgiven, a revamped DX would interfere to cost Hart another match, which appeared to be sort of the nail in the coffin. However, Owen would align himself with the Nation of Domination and would pin Triple H in a tag match at Over the Edge in May by
That's
using
important.
Triple H's own pedigree.
Getting the heat on the heel, huh?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that would give him closure and would end the rivalry without him actually going on to win the belt.
Well, I think this was a great retrospective on this rivalry, and I thank you for it. I do think this definitely is overlooked, and between two people who were surely important to the product at that time, as well as an amazingly written feud, and a feud that made so much sense.
Yeah, it really did. It was one of those logical feuds where you had the real story of the villains, or well, DX in this case, and Hunter, making sure to undercut Owen at every turn and really build up sympathy for him so that when he got his comeuppance, the crowd would really be behind it.
And that definitely worked.
Yeah.
So, I want to move on from that to a little company in Philadelphia called Extreme Championship Wrestling.
Good old
To set the
EC
stage,
dub.
absolutely. As Jerry Lawler would call it, extremely crappy wrestling. So, to set the stage, we've got the ECW World Television title. And two of the best workers in the world at the time fighting for it. Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn.
Yep, I do somewhat remember this.
Now, I've always thought that Jerry Lynn personally is one of the most underrated wrestlers I've ever seen in my life. Not just this feud was overlooked, but his entire career has been overlooked.
Really was. Lynn was actually a terrific worker.
I agree with you completely. And he's probably, if we ever do an underrated workers list, I'll get back into that. But, of course, Jerry Lynn versus RVD. Wow, this was a long, long, long rivalry. So,
yeah,
basically, this rivalry lasted from 1997. It began in 1997. And its most recent match was in 2013.
Sheesh.
Yeah, it's pretty long. I mean, of course, there was breaks in between. But a lot of different companies decided they would try to put these two together because, well, of course, they have so much chemistry. And basically, their first match for the TV title would be with Rob Van Dam as the champion. And he would defend his title against Jerry Lynn. Now, this would be in 1998, after they had had a few encounters with each other, but neither of them had a title at that point. First title match in the feud would be Rob Van Dam defending the World Television title against Jerry Lynn.
Yep. In a very solid match.
Yes, at the Armory in Woodbridge.
Yeah.
Of course, these two have so much natural chemistry with each other. And ECW less, especially at this time, focused on whether either was face or heel, which I think almost revolutionized what indie wrestling was. Because places like PWG and ROH, at least in their more popular years where they had their best workers and stuff, they didn't exactly focus on face or heel rivalries. It was more putting two people who had good chemistry together and making a good match out of it.
Yeah, it really was. It was more about the match quality rather than actual trying to force through a story that mightn't have been there.
Now, of course, we have our naysayers that'll say, well, if there's no story, then why would I watch it? But I don't know. I believe you can be here for wrestling or you can be here for a story, and we're definitely here for both.
Yeah, and when it comes to a story, you can't actually sort of try to force a story through either. Something that WWE are very guilty of. You have to
Absolutely.
make sure that there's an actual interest there for a story first and know an idea of where you want to build it.
So of course I'd find the irony in you pointing out a very like storytelling feud first, and then me going into a workers feud next.
Yeah.
So all over 1998, Rob would defeat Jerry Lynn and defend his title against him. In fact, Rob seemed to have always a leg up on Jerry Lynn.
Yeah.
In fact, it doesn't seem like Rob Van Dam really ever lost to him. I mean, there was in 1999 where Lynn and Sabu defeated Justin Credible and Rob Van Dam. But see, tag matches, and it just, this was a very one-sided feud. And while, yes, I do say it was overlooked, that is the one downside. There's really a lot of Rob Van Dam dominance in this because he was such a big draw for ECW. They were really kind of scared to put the title on Jerry Lynn.
Yeah, and even the whole dominance thing can actually be used as a story writing tactic in its own right, because even if you have the guy winning tag matches, what you can use in that is when it comes to time to them facing each other 1v1, Van Dam would always shine. And in that sense, what you could do is you could use that to build to Lynn eventually getting a victory and having that breakthrough moment.
Which he actually did at one point. Hardcore Heaven 2000, Jerry Lynn defeated Rob Van Dam. That is the only instance I can find of Rob Van Dam losing a one-on-one match with this man. I'm just saying, it is extremely one-sided. Yes, the matches were amazing, which is why I say it was overlooked. Because the work that these two put on, the chemistry that these two had, it was just special, magical. When you have two people in the ring who can go, and then two people in the ring who can go with each other, it's just a whole... It's amazing. It's amazing to see. It's like they're floating around each other. That's what I live for in wrestling.
Yeah, when the matches are great, you can usually use them as an avenue to actually tell the story.
So yes, this feud would last all the way until, well, they had a match actually at Guilty as Charged 2001, which was, if you don't remember, the last ECW pay-per-view under the complete management, the management of Paul Heyman, and that was the final pay-per-view. In fact, the final show, I believe, was Guilty as Charged 2001.
Yep.
Then in WWF, they had a hardcore title match on Sunday Night Heat, where Rob Van Dam would defeat Jerry Lynn. And then they had a few matches in Impact. They had a small feud in TNA, where of course Rob would again best Jerry Lynn at almost every turn. And this is sounding like me being frustrated, but again, these two had such amazing chemistry. I'm not so mad at Rob Van Dam winning almost every match because it was worth watching. Definitely.
Yeah. And going back to that Heat point, Heat was an overlooked show in its own right.
Oh, absolutely. There was a lot of like hidden gems on that show.
Yeah.
Just looking at the entirety of the early 2000s, actually, Heat was one of the actual like best shows that WWE put on them. Sadly, you can't go look at that because they don't have it on the network. They only have 1998 and 1999 as of right now. Sadly.
Yeah.
Well, either way, I feel like this feud was definitely overlooked by some, and these two had an amazing thing in the ring with each other.
Yep.
So what's your next feud, Scotty?
Edge versus Kurt Angle.
Oh, okay. I remember a few of these.
Yep. Basically, this was where the whole "you suck" chant actually started for Angle, because it was Edge that kept poking fun at him and kept prompting the crowd to say it during his entrance.
Indeed. And this is where Angle's bald head came from too, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So this feud marked a lot of changes within Kurt Angle's gimmick.
Really did. As we all know, Kurt at this point was one of the best workers in the world, and Edge was on the rise and starting to mold himself into what we know and love.
Indeed, he was. And of course, no better way to do it than to face somebody who established himself so quickly as Angle.
Yeah.
So, what are a few matches you want to talk about in this feud? Because I've got a few matches that I know about.
The first one basically being the Backlash 2002 match where Angle won, but it was Edge's coming of age performance where he really started to shine and prove that he could be a main event caliber level talent.
Seems like a lot of those guys had those kinds of matches with Kurt Angle where he would prove that he would help prove at least that they were available to be good workers for the time to come. I mean, if you remember Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle at SummerSlam, that really was one of Rey's crowning moments in WWE.
Yeah, it really was. And Angle would help elevate the talent to that level. Which is actually one of the hallmarks of what makes a worker so great.
So Angle would win at Backlash.
Yep.
When would these two meet again?
Judgment Day, which was the hair versus hair match that Edge would win with a small package.
Yes, indeed. That's important because Edge didn't even win with a spear or any sort of finisher.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, it basically showed that he could barely escape with the win.
Which is great writing.
Yeah, they would have multiple Match of the Year candidates throughout the rest of the year on SmackDown, whether that be singles or tags competition. Whereas it would end up benefiting both because Angle would ride the wave to another WWE title reign, and then Edge would establish himself as being the future of the industry.
I believe this feud also was one of my favorite matches in SmackDown history was definitely Rey Mysterio and Edge versus Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle, and this was that was definitely around this time.
Yeah.
Of course, the SmackDown 6 and some of the greatest workers of this generation. So, to my remembrance, this feud ended with a steel cage match on SmackDown, did it not?
It did indeed.
And who won the feud, do you think?
Personally, I think it's one of those feuds where both won in their own way.
Oh, go on.
Basically, what I mean by that is it really didn't matter who won the feud itself, as it was a building block for both of them to move on to the next level. In Kurt's case, it was the WWE Championship. In Edge's case, it was showing that he was indeed the future of the WWE. And that to me is actually as important, if not more important, than the feud itself, is where do they go from there?
Definitely, a hallmark of a good feud is capitalizing with the two superstars on the next few feuds they have and in the future of their careers in general.
Yep.
So this feud definitely propelled both men into a good position on the SmackDown brand for years to come.
It really did.
And we all know the storied careers of both men.
Yep.
So with that being said, I'd like to move on to a match between two of the best mid-card wrestlers that you have ever seen in your life. Both of them, of course, would move on to be main eventers. But as this feud began, they were mid-card. This would be Booker T versus Chris Benoit.
Oh, I remember this feud and these matches.
Yes, I believe this feud was largely overlooked as, again, two of the best workers in both companies they feuded in.
Yeah,
Now,
and I think people forget that about Booker. He was actually a really good worker.
oh, he was a great worker. He was an amazing worker. Now, this primarily, at least the beginning of this, would be for the WCW World Television title, where in 1998, early 1998, Booker and Benoit would fight to 2 time limit draws and a double countout for the World Television title on 2 different Nitros and then a WCW Saturday night.
Yep.
So that would definitely sow the seeds for a rivalry of, well, these two men are definitely matched in skill. Now they need to play a game of who's better, who can one-up the other. So finally, we would get a clear winner at WCW NWO Spring Stampede, where Booker T would defeat Chris Benoit.
Yep.
But the feud didn't end there. At Profiles in Pain, Benoit would defeat Booker T for the title.
Yep.
And then this began a best of 7 series for the World Television title. Now, Benoit and Booker T tried to, one up each other, as I said earlier, in any case they could possibly do it. Chris Benoit being one of the best technical workers of this in any generation. Booker T being an amazing worker in his own right and a great mic worker.
Yeah, he really was. And to be honest, this is actually my favorite best of 7 series of all time.
I would definitely agree with you. So, the best of 7 would begin with Chris Benoit defeating Booker T. But then Booker T would even it up. So with it all evened up, Benoit would take the next one. Finally, Benoit again with a win, and Booker T would get a win from there. And then one more time, Booker T would get a win to make it 3-3. Then, at Thunder number 20, the 20th Thunder episode, Booker T would defeat Chris Benoit by disqualification. So these guys are 3-3 and a disqualification. Do you think the best of 7 ended there?
Nope.
Absolutely not, it didn't. Because, of course, it had to end at the Great American Bash, where Booker T would defeat Chris Benoit to earn number 1 contendership, of course. Then this rivalry grew a little bit quiet, if you will. They didn't have any matches for a little while. A few years, in fact. 4 years, to be exact. Then Chris Benoit would defeat Booker T for number one contendership for the Intercontinental title on Raw in 2002. And then they would meet again on SmackDown, where they were caught in the mid card of SmackDown, just like the mid card of WCW.
Yeah.
Now, they of course took part in numerous multi-man matches, a lot of fatal 4-ways and 6-man eliminations before Benoit would capture the United States title. And then Booker T would capture it from him on SmackDown, only for Chris Benoit to defeat him 2 weeks later by count out. And here we go again. These two just cannot get a regular finish to a match, can they?
No.
Then again, they fought on SmackDown 3 weeks later to a draw. So they decided that the United States title would be defended in a best of 7 series. Oh, did we forget about that? Because it's back now.
I actually remember this series very well.
Yes. Do you remember that Booker T got the lead very early?
Yep.
In fact, he got 3 matches on Benoit. 3. One at Survivor Series, then at a special SmackDown, and then on SmackDown. Before Chris Benoit would finally get a win at Armageddon. It wouldn't be enough, though, because the end of the feud would come at... Oh, wait, did they ever even finish this best of 7? Or was their match at No Way Out the end of the best of 7? I'm not sure about this. It doesn't look like they ended the best of 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, Benoit would defeat Booker T at No Way Out for the United States title, and that would be the end of the feud. This feud that had been going on for 8 years finally ended with Chris Benoit netting his final victory against Booker T. And they would
Ah,
basically coexist on SmackDown until Benoit moved to ECW.
oh, I remember what happened now. What actually happened is I think Booker was injured and Randy Orton would sub in for him.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Because what would happen is Benoit would then beat Orton twice, and then in match 7, Orton would win to win the United States Championship.
I see. Okay. I didn't know about that. Well, see, now I'm getting educated on wrestling. Thank you, Scotty. There's a reason he's my partner, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on to your next feud.
This one was actually just 3 matches, but they were really high quality matches between 2 good workers in Mr. Perfect and Doink the Clown.
Ah, was this when Doink the Clown was this a heel or a face Doink the Clown?
This was the heel.
Right, so this would be his dark, almost Joker-like persona.
Yeah.
I loved that. That is a totally overlooked gimmick in itself.
It really is. Matt Bourne was a fantastic worker and is definitely one of the most underrated workers of all time.
So when did Doink and Mr. Perfect fight?
They fought when Doink debuted in WWE in like 93.
Ah, okay. 93. Was Perfect just coming off of his... No, he wasn't. I was going to ask if he was just coming off his feud with Brett, but he couldn't have been.
No.
I remember Perfect feud with Brett. That was amazing. So they began their matches in 1993 when Doink debuted.
Yeah. Basically, it was for the quarterfinals of the King of the Ring.
Ah, okay. And I'm guessing Perfect would go over.
He would, but there were 2 time limit draws before the 3rd match where Perfect would win.
I see. So they milked this one.
Yeah.
I like it.
The thing is it was basically just 2 good workers going toe to toe, with the prize being a chance to go for the King of the Ring.
An interesting prize there. Usually it's a title on the line or just bragging rights, but just the opportunity to be in the King of the Ring tournament, that's an interesting.
Yeah, it also put over the importance of the tournament itself, having a match like this to show how far people were willing to go to actually get the crown, because this is when it really actually had some meaning.
Thanks for ruining that for us, WWE. So yes, Matt Bourne, definitely an amazing worker at that time, and Perfect. Well, we all know Perfect was one of the best technical workers of that time as well. So definitely, I would think that this would be a great feud and a great matchup between 2 good workers.
Yeah, it really was. And it's a shame that they never actually really interacted much after this feud or matches.
That does suck. That sucks. That definitely sucks. So the next feud I would like to talk about, actually, is a TNA feud, believe it or not.
All right.
I would like to retrospect the Motor City Machine Guns versus Beer Money Incorporated.
This was a great feud during the peak years of TNA, really.
Yes, the mid to late 2000s. At this time, TNA was definitely on a roll and started to establish themselves as a possible alternative to WWE programming.
Yeah, they really were.
And interesting they were, with some of the best indie stars of that time lacing up boots for the promotion.
Yep.
Two of these indie stars from Detroit, Michigan, well known as MCMG, the Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin.
Yep.
Of
Incredible
course,
workers.
oh my god, two of the best workers of that time, and definitely one of the best tag teams of recent memory.
Yeah.
So, they would fight Beer Money, the team of James Storm and Bobby Roode. Now, these two were definitely, they had an odd couple interesting dynamic, where one was this alcoholic redneck type guy, the other was this this Canadian pretty boy, came from money, which is why, Beer Money was their name. Personally, I loved Beer Money as a tag team. Their Off the Wagon challenge was awesome. Their whole air about them was awesome. And both of them were very good workers, especially they were good mic workers.
Yeah. I really liked the dynamic between them, as well, as you had two people that you wouldn't normally expect to see together, actually together and work well in what seemed to be an odd couple relationship.
Right, exactly. So, honestly, these guys didn't have that many matches together, but it had a lot of build-up whenever it was happening. It would start in 2008 on an episode of TNA Impact, where the MCMG would handily defeat Beer Money in 4 minutes. Now, at that time, Beer Money was quite over, and the MCMG defeating them in that long was definitely an underdog taking the win in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Now, of course, angered by their embarrassment at the hands of Shelley and Sabin, they would challenge them to a strap match 3 weeks later on another episode of TNA, which Beer Money would win.
Yeah.
So then well, of course, the Beer Money would gain the World Tag Team titles of TNA, and then they began feuding over that. Where at Turning Point 2008, Beer Money would defeat the MCMG in 16 minutes. They gave them 16 minutes. That was a decent amount of time for these two. And of course, that match was awesome. I remember that one very distinctly.
Yeah, that match was great. It was one of those where if you gave him like that 15 to 20 minutes to really just go out there and work, you knew you were going to get a fantastic match from him.
Now, they wouldn't battle as just the two teams fighting each other. I mean, they would have a few instances where they were a bunch of different teams in just a cluster of teams. As an example, there was a three-way match between Beer Money, Team 3D, and the Motor City Machine Guns that ended with a no contest. I remember that very well.
Yeah.
And another three-way at Turning Point 2009 for the World Tag Team titles, where the British Invasion would defeat the MCMG and Beer Money.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, the World Tag Team title was vacated. And guess who met for the vacated title?
Beer Money and the MCMG.
Of course, Victory Road 2010. The Motor City Machine Guns would defeat Beer Money in this one, and this began a best of 5 series. Woo! Yeah. So this best of 5 series was unique in that all of the matches, at least from what I'm seeing here, are gimmick matches. So it would begin with a ladder match on an episode of TNA Impact, which Beer Money would win, and then a street fight on the next episode of TNA Impact, which again Beer Money would win, and then finally the MCMG would win a steel cage on the next episode of Impact. Then an Ultimate X match, where the Motor City Machine Guns would win, and the whole shebang ended with a 2 out of 3 falls match, where the Motor City Machine Guns would defeat Beer Money Inc.
Yeah.
And do you think that this is the last time they would meet?
Nope.
It was not, because at Genesis 2011 they would meet again, where Beer Money would get their little revenge on them and then defend their titles against them on TNA Impact in 2011. And now, as I explained, these guys had great chemistry with each other, and they almost got booked 50-50, even though the MCMG were displayed as the underdogs.
Yeah, it was one of those stories where they wanted to show that even if MCMG appeared to be underdogs, that they could definitely go with the team that was expected or supposed to be more dominant.
Right, exactly. The underdog faces versus the dominant heels, where the underdog faces were booked almost just as well. And I loved the story where they were embarrassed by their loss to MCMG, and these kids, they beat us in 4 minutes, they embarrassed us, we want their revenge against them. That is a great motivation for two teams to have a match.
Really is.
And it's hard to not believe that TNA, with all of these good workers and all of these good storylines from about 2006 to 2010, were a decent alternative to WWE, and for good reason, with things like this on their helm.
They really were, and I actually remember that it was that period when I was watching TNA almost as religiously as WWE.
You'll have to forgive my partner here. He is feeling a bit under the weather. He's here for your hearing pleasure, though.
Yeah.
Now, yes, of course, TNA. Even as a kid, I realized that they definitely had something on their hands. I mean, valuable players like AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, and wow. just they picked up a bunch of free agents from WWE as well. People like Christian Cage and Booker T.
Yep.
Now, of course, TNA would have its share of hokey storylines, and they would fall off a cliff in the mid-2010s. But they may be experiencing a resurgence about right now. I'd watch out for it.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of recent TNA, and the match quality looks to have gotten back to a level near what they were back at their peak.
Near, but I wouldn't say the exact. I wouldn't say they're still in that form. It's going to take a while to build up another base. The ones that they lost. But that's a whole nother video, is it not? You have another feud to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny how last week we were talking about the Cruiserweight title, and this feud is actually between two Cruiserweights.
Oh, is it?
Two of the most, more of the WWE era of the Cruiserweight title, but two very underrated workers in the Hurricane and Jamie Noble.
Ooh, okay. So I'm guessing this is around 2003 SmackDown.
Yeah, it started technically in the summer of 2002 when Hurricane was drafted to SmackDown, whilst being the reigning Cruiserweight champion at that time.
Ah.
Basically, there was like a
hot commodity.
Yeah. Basically, it started when he had like a series of anonymous letters delivered to him throughout locker rooms and backstage areas across the country. And the letters turned out to be from Nydia, who won the first season of Tough Enough and was a former girlfriend of his.
Interesting. Now, this is definitely one of those storytelling feuds we were talking about, huh?
Yeah. This feud would be what would debut Jamie Noble and his redneck trailer park gimmick from there, which was very believable, surprisingly, and entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, he worked on the mic really, really well with that gimmick.
He really did.
And that's a classic example of taking something that would be perceived as a bad gimmick, if you will. I'll put quotes around that. A bad gimmick, and turning it into something where you're over, you're a good heel, you're getting heat.
Yeah, it's making the most of what you were given from the writing team and basically gimmick-wise.
And of course, we know both men as talented workers.
Yeah.
So when exactly were they battling?
They were battling around like the summer of 2003. They had an excellent match at King of the Ring in June with the Cruiserweight, where Nydia would interfere and help Noble win the title. But that was really the only match in the feud. Most of it was basically around the story and having Noble and Nydia torment Hurricane over his past relationship with Nydia.
Ah, okay. I see you like this feud for its storytelling.
Yeah.
I can definitely see why. It does seem like a very entertaining story, and really nice.
Yeah,
Between,
it's one of
two
those
charismatic
feuds.
workers.
Yeah, it's one of those feuds where you really just need like the one match, because you would have the whole story arc lead into that big showdown, just like you would in a movie.
You're absolutely right about that. So, let's move into our final feud retrospective of the video.
Yep.
Now, I was talking about ECW earlier, and in the ECW mid-card, there were a bunch of different, very, very good feuds. Chief of which became Yoshihiro Tajiri versus Super Crazy. Now, in the late 90s, these two were extremely underrated workers and two international stars that were just finding their way into the USI using ECW as their platform.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Theory would definitely make his mark in WWE, and Super Crazy would also work for WWE for a short time, but we're talking about their experience in ECW here.
Yeah, basically their best work together.
Oh, absolutely. So these two would definitely trade wins with each other, and this is around the time where Tajiri was a part of the Unholy Alliance with Mikey Whipwreck and the Sinister Minister.
Yeah, Ripwreck himself was an underrated worker.
Oh, of course. Of course. Definitely an underrated worker. So, Whipwreck and Sinister Minister made it their mission to constantly make interfere in Tajiri and Crazy's business. Now, these two, despite that, would definitely trade wins with each other. I mean, it was almost 50-50 the entire time. And eventually, they would also involve little Guido in this feud of the full-blooded Italian. And now, if you think Tajiri and Crazy themselves had chemistry, they added another man who both of them had chemistry with. So, also another man with a stable backing him too, which made almost every match with these guys in it an interesting affair.
Yeah.
Now, these guys would have a bunch of three-way dances, like a bunch, a lot of them. There was definitely, I can definitely name one at Anarchy Rules 1999 with Yoshihiro Tajiri coming out on top that I absolutely loved. That match was amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that match.
They also had a three-way with Jerry Lynn, the man we talked about earlier, a three-way match with him at November to Remember 99, Super Crazy New Jerry, where he would come out on top, where Jerry Lynn would come out on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they would have a Mexican death match in 2000 where Super Crazy would defeat Yoshihiro Tajiri, and then a Japanese death match where Tajiri would get it over Crazy.
Yeah,
and then for the television title, they'd have another Japanese death match where Super Crazy would beat Yoshihiro Tajiri. But it wasn't over there.
Yeah, well,
It wasn't. Go on, what were you going to say?
oh, I was just going to say the whole deathmatch thing was, at first it was both winning the ones that suited them, and then it was Super Crazy showing that he could win on Tajiri's terms.
Yes, absolutely. I love that entire storyline. I thought that was awesome. It was a great depiction. Then on Massacre on 34th Street, Mikey Whipwreck and Tajiri would defeat Kid Cash and Super Crazy. And then Whipwreck and Tajiri would again defeat Kid Cash and Super Crazy, as well as the FBI, represented by Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke. They would continue
Yeah.
to trade wins with each other, a lot of them, up to the three-way dance that all three men had at One Night Stand 2005 in the Hammerstein, where Super Crazy would beat Little Guido Yoshihiro Tajiri. They only gave them 6 minutes for this match, but oh god, that they were a good 6 minutes. These guys just had so much chemistry with each other, and you can tell by how often ECW booked them with each other.
Yeah. The thing is what they did was, yes, they only had 6 minutes, but they made the most of their time, which is something that is the hallmark of both good workers and good storytelling within not just the feud, but the match itself.
Yes, of course. So, I think we've had a nice little retrospective of a few different feuds we thought were overlooked.
Yeah, we really have.
And I hope that our watchers, our viewers, our listeners, well, I hope they had a fun ride with us and learned a thing or two.
Yeah, because it was really fun looking back at these feuds and realizing that some of us probably forgot about them, and it was great to relive them.
Absolutely. And always great to relive a bunch of nice wrestling memories with a friend.
It really is.
So, this was episode 2 of SLAMCAST. Thank you very much for watching.
Bye, and we'll see you again next week.
Right, this is Gareth signing off. Tajiri